This weekend, I made a bit of an impulse purchase.
We
Um,
love impulse purchases.
I'm going to show you because it's literally right on my wall. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
I installed this myself, which was not fun, but I found a great deal and I got a 75-inch TV
Holy cow!
and I installed it myself.
I've helped hang up a TV, not 75 inches, and it was heavy and hard to do.
No, with someone yelling at me going, "Oh, pick up the
Make
side.
sure
It's
it's on the thing. Make sure it's on there. Don't let go of it.
Welcome to Getting Down to Business, your show on all things related to dental practice transactions and transitions. We cover the important steps every dentist needs to take along the way of their dental practice career. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, and click that notification bell so you never miss an episode. On today's episode, we examine the transition process from start to finish. We are setting the stage for an upcoming guest on the show who has successfully purchased a dental practice of her own using Hindley Burgmaier Group to help navigate. All right, let's get down to business.
Well, let's just get started. Basically, what I did was I wanted to create a sort of like a preliminary episode just before we have our case study on Dr. Snyder. I just kind of wanted to go through, practice transitions and kind of just go down the list as far as what key points are part of the transition process. So I'm joined by the wonderful Kelly Yardman, our business broker consultant, and of course, our amazing valuation analyst, Rachel Robles. So thank you guys for being here. I definitely feel like I have an unfair advantage with you guys being on the call because you guys have the experience and all of the understanding that goes into these transactions. So I just want to start off with just that understanding. What exactly, if you had to define it, and you guys can answer separately, or if one of you wants to just jump in here, how do you define what is a dental transition anyways? Like how would you define it? What is the definition of it?
Well, I mean, a dental transition, like a dental practice acquisition, would be, a seller who wants to sell their dental practice and they are transitioning that to a buyer who wants to continue that dental practice. The buyer buys everything in the practice, whether it be the assets that are in there, which the equipment, the technology, and also kind of sort of the staff. We always joke here at Burgmaier Associates because Eric originally bought the firm from a guy named Dan Hilton, and he had an employee. Her name was Jill. Well, her name is Jill. And we always joke around about that because we talk about Jill being the oldest employee, but she was bought. Eric always says, I bought her. But he bought her in the acquisition in a sense because she was the employee that came along with the practice. And it takes a while for the transition to happen. I mean, the acquisition part takes a while, and so does the transition. I would say probably at least give it a year.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let me
Sometimes shorter, sometimes longer, but that's probably the average.
I want to drill into the types of dental transitions because there's different categories, right? I mean, you might have somebody buy into a practice, you might have somebody buy out of a practice, you might have an associate who becomes a partner.
Mhm.
What are some other types of dental transitions? Maybe retirement as well?
Well, yeah, that's probably the main one. So, well, and
Like, what's the difference between a buy-in and a buyout?
It depends on if the buyer is buying 100% of the business or if they're buying a percentage of the business. Typically, when you say a buy-in, that's like you're bringing on one or more or an additional partner. So they don't own or they're not purchasing 100% interest in the business. A buyout would be if one of those partners wants to leave and the other partners buy their interest back and that one partner now leaves and the other partners absorb their interest.
Well, and there's also the associate to partner. So like, for instance, if you're a huge dental practice, like I've done employment agreements for certain practices who are they have huge practices and they have multiple associates. Sometimes in the employment agreement, they'll put in the employment agreement that if somebody works for a certain period of time for the practice, they have, or they're offered the opportunity to become a partner. And so they have this outlined a lot of times as a buy-in. So they do a percentage buy-in, like they'll do maybe 10% after this period of time, 20% after this period of time, all the way up to that now they're owning the practice completely. For a dentist to buy in that way, there's dentists that buy in that don't work for the practice, that work, outside of that practice, and they purchase it because it's listed. And then that's a totally different type of acquisition. There's practices that sell to DSOs. Those are also a different type of acquisition. There's practices that merge with one another. I mean, we haven't really handled that. If you have one practice and another practice, sometimes they want to join, and that becomes a group practice. And so that
And
is
what we
that's a
see, the
strategy.
size of the business definitely impacts the multiples that we apply.
Mhm.
So typically we see $0 to $1 million revenue, $1 to $5 million revenue, and then $5 million and above. And there's like those three size categories, and each of them have a different multiple because the larger the business, the more value. So when they merge, they're kind of, rolling up. And even though the businesses independently don't really change, they are together more valuable.
Yeah. And that lowers the risk too, right? Rachel, we talked about
Right.
risk, and if you're larger, the larger you are, the less risk you have.
Your risk is spread out.
Yeah.
The difference, again, between like buy in and buy out would be like if I'm buying in to a business, I might, or to a practice, I might be already working there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I also could be maybe, then the difference for say a buy out would be maybe I'm another dental office and I want to, or a DSO, and I want to, scoop up some more market share. So I'm going to buy out this other practice and kind of.
Or you're being bought out, meaning you want to move
that's
to Florida, and you're a partner in a dental practice, or let's just say you're the doc in the dental practice, you have an associate, and you want to be bought out by your partner, or you want the associate to buy you out so you could go to Florida or whatever. In a dental practice acquisition that I'm doing right now, there's a transition where the doc is purchasing the practice, but they're going to employ the seller. So the seller is going to provide a transition period where they transfer knowledge to the buyer. They do that. There's no compensation for that, but they also sometimes will want to work in the practice even part-time and finish their cases that they're working on, and also work on some patients that they want to continue doing, especially if it's a big practice that can withstand both of the doctors. They can work for the buyer over a period of time until they really want to retire. So a couple of years ago, we sold a practice. The dentist was very well known. He was very reputable in our area. And he became the associate for the buyer, and he stayed the associate for a couple of years, and he was paid monthly to do dentistry just as an employee. But usually the practice has to be very, very profitable, has to be high income.
Well, if the office only can support one dentist,
Right.
and you, a dentist, choose not to work in that office, but instead to put another dentist in that office, you're going to have to pay that dentist fair market value.
Pay me my money.
You're going to have to pay them on their production. And if that office is not highly profitable, then you, the owner, may not really see a lot of benefit in owning it, because if you're not generating the income from that production, then the benefit to you is just the profit that's left over at the end.
And I had that situation once where the practice was like an $800,000 practice, and she wanted to work in it as the employee. And the buying doc did not want to do that because it would cut into her profit margin. She had to be able to pay herself.
Mhm.
And any dentist who's listening to this right now knows dentists have, if you, unless you're one of the lucky ones that are able to pay off your student debt right away, not have student debt, or pay for it through working while you're in school, which that usually doesn't happen for dentists, you have a high amount of student debt. And so there is no way that a practice that's making $800,000, you're going to be able to work in it with an associate. You might be able to pay your debt service, but when it comes to your living expenses and where you're going to live, and you paying off your student loans and doing all that kind of stuff, you're probably not going to have the money to do that.
Right. That may work out if the buyer already has a practice that they work in, but they're just trying to expand their brand. So they're gonna
Employ
kind
that.
of, I don't want to say merge, but they're just going to grow by absorbing another practice. They're going to buy it, and that doctor is going to still work in that practice, but only as an employee of the buyer. They won't own the practice anymore. They'll continue to run it, or, work in it, but they won't be an owner anymore. They'll be paid it as an employee, and the bank may lend on it because the buyer has another business and they have, healthy financials and other means of income.
Right.
Now let's get into the actual, like the preparation parts, preparing for a transition, not something that you want to leave for the last minute. Let's start off with, say, a brief overview of the financial considerations. What are some tips on optimizing financial health before a transition?
And by way of evaluation, we would have any client, whether they're a seller or a buyer, obtain evaluation, whether it's evaluation of their own practice or due diligence on the practice that they're interested in, to determine a fair market value. Now, fair market value is not the same thing as the asking price. So if it's the seller, they're free to list it at any amount they want, but knowing, getting evaluation and knowing the fair market value gives them more information. If the asking price is within our range of value, then they have, a lot of justification for their asking price. Or if they're the buyer, then it gives them knowledge for, upcoming negotiations.
What would you say are like your top 3 tips for optimizing your financial health before a transition?
Start as soon as you can. Get your valuation before you're absolutely ready to sell, so that you have an opportunity to identify areas that you can make improvements, and have an opportunity, you have time to make improvements. Don't slow down your production. Right. Don't let the decline start before you market your practice and have interested parties. And even then, don't let it decline through that transition process, because the buyer is going to want to see interim financials throughout the transition, and you don't want to let that revenue really drop off. Be very mindful of your expenses, because a nice healthy profit margin is really important. We don't value only on revenue. We like to see healthy profit and maintaining expenses. That doesn't mean that you can't have discretionary expenses, but your actual operating expenses really need to be in line with like our common size goals to really show that your practice is profitable.
Great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about legal considerations, right? Because you're going to have some necessary legal documentation, right? So I'm thinking of 2 in particular, the purchase agreements, and if needed, well, the partnership agreements. Can you guys talk on those a little bit? We use Connie Alberto for the purchase agreement, right?
We're on the real estate.
For the real estate. Okay.
Only, yes.
Oh, so are you saying there's another purchase agreement for the actual practice?
Yes.
So there's 2 purchase agreements, if there is, assuming the person is buying the real estate as well.
Right.
The practice and the real estate transitions are 2 independent transactions, but they just occur at the same time. So you sell the business independent of the property, but you're just selling them both to the same person.
When we do these contracts, we have to make sure that the buyer and seller have obtained an attorney, because we need to make sure that all of these contracts are in compliance with applicable laws and regulations and guidelines that need to be met, for our state, especially because we have a state that, what is it, where married people, like you have to, like, in all of our agreements, we have to have spouses sign a
Equal
common
property? Is it
community property state.
community
Sorry.
property?
I couldn't think of that for the life of me. So it is a community property state. So this means that if you sell a practice, and even though your wife has nothing to do, or your husband has nothing to do with that practice, you still have to have them sign off on the purchase agreement that they know that you're selling it, as well as the buyer has to have their spouse sign the contract with the awareness that they're purchasing something that big because of that. So, and then also because of tax issues too, because, if a seller sells a dental practice and doesn't tell their spouse, and then there's tax implications that the spouse is on the hook for as well, there's a lot of moving parts there. You have to make sure that everybody knows what everybody's doing. So there's that. You also have to have attorneys review these contracts. So it's not just the broker putting together these contracts. The buyer and seller have to engage an attorney to review the contracts to make sure that everything is, in there appropriately to meet state and federal guidelines.
You also want to make sure that the synergy, the fit is right. If you have two very different people that can't see eye to eye, it doesn't matter if everything else looks good on paper. It's just not gonna, if they can't get along post sale, then that's not
It's
good.
so interesting that you say that, Josh, because in Norton's book, he talks about that a lot. He has a scenario where he has the seller and the buyer, like they have their significant other and they go to dinner and they have dinner together.
Yes, I did read that.
Did you read that?
Yes,
Yeah.
and sometimes you might even have to have a second dinner,
Yeah.
but you take that time. It's not just a quick bite. I mean, you're going to sit down. It's going to be an evening. Both spouses are going to be there. You're going to have a talk. I mean, that's the right way to do it. So you can really get to know the person that is either buying your practice or selling it to you. Let's look at the next segment here. The actual process of transitioning. So let me ask you guys, spell it out or put the steps out in front of people. What is the step-by-step process from decision that either I want to buy or sell to execution?
The seller usually will come to us because they're interested either in moving out of state or retiring, all of those types of scenarios that we talked about a little bit. They'll reach out to us and they will want to know what the process is of selling their dental practice. Usually the first meeting is with me and I meet with them about their goals and aspirations and what it is that they want to achieve by selling their practice, so that I get a kind of good idea on their timeline, their wish to continue operating in the practice even as an employee, or if they just want to walk away. I'm already starting to think of people of who want certain type of transition workflows or how they want the transition to work out for them. And so I'm already starting to think about who would be interested in purchasing their practice because of the networks that we build. Once I get that together and talk to them about that, I go over the valuation process, because the first thing that we want to do is we want to perform a valuation. Now, sometimes they think that they just want to sell it at a certain price and they know what the value is. They think they know already what the value is because they know what they're producing, and they have a number in their head already. But I do like to have them do this process of the valuation, because any buyer that's going to come to the table to negotiate a price with them or negotiate paying them something will have an opportunity to do their own valuation or their own due diligence with their representatives, and they will know what that number is going to be, whether the doctor says, an inflated number or a less number. They're going to find out. Like if they want $1 million for their practice and it's only worth 800,000, we can pretty much guarantee that the buyer is going to know that it's worth 800,000. They're going to find out. So we like to do this process so that the doctor isn't surprised by that. So they can ask for $1 million, that's fine. But we don't want them to be surprised if someone comes and says, I want to offer 800 because that's what I did my own due diligence and I found this to be the worth of it. So we like to do that. Now I can transfer this to Rachel and she can kind of talk a little bit about when she comes in.
Yeah, then we do the typical valuation where we look at, 5 years, 5 years of data on the practice and build our model, look at normalized income and expenses, come up with our range of fair market value. We'll present that to the client and make sure that the client and we agree, we've explained everything. And then, provide them some deliverable that they can choose to provide to interested parties or not.
Okay.
And then if their asking price does fall within our value range and we can justify their asking price, then we can help them by when they have an interested party, they can provide that, that interested party their valuation and we can support it. We can actually meet with them and explain the valuation to them.
And we've done that a few times, huh? We've
Oh yeah.
Interested buyers that come in, they want to understand how we came up with the purchase price. We can go over that with them. Usually after that, after we present them with the valuation and they agree with our value and they want to move forward with a purchase or a sale, they will sign a listing agreement with us. And then we will market the practice. We'll talk to all of our partners that we have relationships with and let them know this is available. We also have a list of potential buyers that are looking for practices to purchase, and we'll notify them, that we have this practice available. Because we know from meeting with them multiple times what exactly they're looking for. We won't talk about that this is the practice, but we'll give like the financial aspect of the practice. This is how well it's doing. This is the profit margin. This is how many employees they have, and they're all, have a great, tenure.
Mm-hmm.
They're all, experienced, and they work with a consultant and they do this. Like we'll talk about that kind of stuff and see, who would be interested. And usually we have a lot of multiple people interested in practices once they list. Then once those people are interested, we have them sign an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement, so that they cannot discuss any information or pertinent information with anybody. They really shouldn't be talking to anybody about it because that kind of disrupts the confidentiality. Just in case somebody talks to somebody else and they find, an employee finds out or a patient finds out or even people that they refer to may find out. And, people talk and it's a small town. And so we don't want that to happen. We do give the financials, we do give them redacted financials, which doesn't give them their name or anything. We just give them, some support documentation of how we came up with the price. We do not give out the valuation, the specific valuation to
with like the name
potential buyers.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Recap, first they meet with you, you get an idea of what their goals are. You begin with evaluation to get the fair market value so that you can say, hey, this is what the market is pretty much gonna view your business as being worth. You can charge whatever you want, but just letting you know, this is what, the data suggests. And then, you start the process of finding a buyer or a partner to take that transition phase to the next point.
In the process of so when we talk about transaction and transition, those are two separate things. The transaction is the actual transaction of purchasing the practice and buying the practice and it funding. So the transaction is you have the purchase agreement completed and you're getting the money for that. That's a transaction. The transition is what takes the longest. It is what we talked about when we talked about how, maybe they should have dinner together. That's a part of the transition. The buyer should be going into that practice on a weekly basis before the transaction happens to learn about the patients, to learn about the employees, to learn about how they do scheduling, how they do billing. I mean, the buyer's going to need to do that like every single week, meet with them and go over this stuff, because day one, they're not going to know anything if they don't do this. And the practice isn't going to stop just because now they own it. They have to get their payroll company set up before the transaction happens. Because they're going to have to pay people quickly after they own the practice. They're going to have to consider taking out working capital if they're going to buy the AR. They have to consider all this stuff before the transaction happens. These are all the things for the buyer on the buyer side that they need to do so that it's a seamless transition.
Let's talk about life after the transition. Adjusting to the new roles, both from perspective of the dentist going out and the dentist coming in. So I know I've heard you guys say you do not recommend making major staff changes or, shaking up things, stirring the pot too much initially for the first year or so.
Well, I think that the most important thing is what you said, Josh, is about like their priority should be building rapport with the staff, the patients, and any referral networks that they have. So that's like the most important thing, because what they need to do is build trust, because now this is a new person. The other person, the seller, has already done that over the years that they've been working with these people. Now the new buyer needs to do that. In order to do that, they need to be very transparent on everything that they're doing, especially with their staff. They need to be they need to over communicate with them on everything, because people do not trust them when they first come in. So it is a little bit difficult at first for the buyer to come in, but as long as they're clear on the plan on how they're going to operate the practice with the staff, they're clear with the patients on how they do their treatment plans, what have you, and hopefully they're going to follow the seller's treatment plan and build that trust. That's like the number one, I think the number one priority.
You purchase this practice based on historical information, and your goal is just to maintain, right? Like you're going to expect some changes or challenges in the very beginning, but if you expect to continue the way that, the seller left off, you need to make sure that you build and maintain the relationships just as the seller did.
We're building this episode up for our special guest that hopefully will be on the next call, who can actually give us, the perspective of a doctor that's purchased a practice and all the real life stories that kind of go along with that. Any advice on navigating transitions successfully? I can already think of one, but let's
I can think of
Go ahead.
I think the best thing to do is try not to do this all by yourself. Like, engage industry experts to help you, whether it be your CPA, whether it be a due diligence firm to help you through the due diligence process. If you're selling your practice, don't do DIY, sell my practice, because that could cause a lot of issues as well. You want to maintain your revenue and your profits. You want to continue seeing patients. You don't want to stop to have to take a call because somebody's wanting to buy your practice. Hire people to do this for you. And also there's going to be bumps along the way as you engage somebody or as you accept their letter of intent and you're working with them to close on your practice. There's could be delays and there could be things that come up, and just know and just keep it in your mind that these challenges could be open to for opportunities, and just keep the course. I mean, there's always something that's going to happen. I don't even think I've known somebody that has bought a home that there's not some kind of hiccup, with an inspection or a roof leak or something going on. And so just remember that you accepted this letter of intent from a person that you believe is going to continue practicing and keep your employees employed and your patients health at forefront, and then you can be able to retire. So just keep that in the back of your mind, and just keep moving forward.
Great.
And don't
embrace
wait
the
until the
challenges.
last minute.
That
Yeah.
was the one I was thinking of. Yes.
Don't wait until the last minute. Don't wait until the last minute to reach out to someone too, because we can help you from the very beginning, tell you what to do first, get you on course, take the first step right.
Thanks so much for tuning into Getting Down to Business. Be sure to check out Norton Hindley's book, Getting Down to Business, available on Amazon. You can find the link in the description. We hope you will join us next time as we interview a real-life success story. Tune in next time. We'll see you later.
There's other types of, you might want to just delete this part where I'm kind of like not saying something. But